So the future of robotics, as we've discussed today in the Futurist Forum, is very much one that's going to be integrated with humans, and it's going to be intelligent. So I would like to think about terms that define things. So I've been thinking in terms of intelligent, integrated, humanized robotics. Intelligent because there's going to be a lot of deep learning and AI coming into robotics simply because of the complexity that robotics are going to be dealing with. Interactive because unlike being in a manufacturing floor doing tasks, the future robots, and we've been defining robots in very broadly in terms of anything interacting with humans, are going to be interacting with humans. So it has to be interactive in terms of recognizing images, facial expressions, and having expressions to be able to interact back. That's very different than the more rigid robotics that we're familiar with, and humanized in that they're going to begin to deal with humans in a lot of things. I think, I've heard about service robotics. Service very much implies a one-way interaction, but I really see the future of robotics as being intelligent, interactive, bidirectional, and working with humans. So very different than what we have today. So there are various levels of impact or considerations that we need to have when we think about the future of robotics. At the top level, governance, right? What are the rules and regulations? So when we think about the drones, the autonomous cars, the many things that are going to be around us inside of our homes, what are the governance models? Second, around security and hacking. The future robots are not in manufacturing, in closed buildings. They're going to be in our homes, in our lives, access to our digital data. So how are we going to protect that? On the more cultural level, I think we need to think about what impact does this have on our experience? With the mobile and social revolution, we've seen interaction evolve from human to social media, often to human to somebody I don't even know that I consider a friend. Now it's going to be perhaps me interacting with an entity called a robot throughout the day and perhaps never interacting with a human. If that happens, how is that going to impact experience? And culturally, how does that impact our cultures being formed? When we had robots in manufacturing, we dealt with efficiency, cost, scale, perfection. When we bring robots into our lives, I think there's an element of our culture that we're impacting in our experience. And then, of course, there's the third element, which is jobs. As we look for efficiency for the reason to bring robots out, what happens is we're going to be displacing a lot of jobs. Now, you could argue that some of those jobs don't need to be there. Certainly, there are days that I go to certain places that it's so inefficient, I wish it were a machine. I get it. But that's different than considering that everything around me is going to change. When McDonald's and post office and the bank and my doctor and my nurse and my everything goes away, right? When cars no longer have drivers, trucks no longer have that, when I no longer have a waiter at a restaurant, all of those amount to jobs. And if you multiply that by the hundreds of millions globally, we have about 7 billion population. Could we say that maybe 10% of the jobs will get replaced by the future robots? Is it conceivable to say 20% of the total jobs will get replaced? Well, unless the rate of finding new jobs for the people who lose them and retraining them and also training the new workforce to come in to be ready for this, we will have a huge problem globally to deal with, right? Now, every time there's been a technological advancement, it has opened up new opportunities, but short term, what we have seen in manufacturing and robotics, we've seen jobs being lost. In the United States, as these jobs went out, these people never got trained. So we've had virtually cities paralyzed because of that. So I think we have social, technological, cultural, and moral responsibilities when we think about the future of robotics. It depends what we mean by regulation. I'll draw an analogy that's a little bit unrelated but related. Uber came out with cars and drivers in an industry that had had taxi drivers with very rigid background checks and trained, and suddenly we get into a car often with somebody who doesn't even know where you're going because a GPS is going to show them, and they really don't have any background in driving. Regulations are very loose. When we get into driverless cars and there's a real issue around regulations needing to be there. Certainly when you get into drones, we're going to definitely need regulation. I certainly don't want somebody else's package dropping the wrong place. And so we need regulation, of course, for regulating and making sure things operate properly. On the other hand, I say that we have to be careful if regulation, by that question we mean over-regulation, because industry grows when it has opportunity to flourish. That's what we've seen with Airbnb, another great example where regulation was completely absent, right? You're booking a room in somebody's house, you don't know about them, you haven't done their background check, certainly Airbnb hasn't done it, but you're showing up in their house anyways. And it created a massive new economy. And if you take those sharing economies and if you had given them regulation at the beginning, the question is how much might have that stalled, that opportunity? So I would answer that question by saying when it comes to security, safety, certainly when it gets into regulations around access to data and hacking, that's super important. But over-regulation can be paralyzing. So we would need to be very careful.